I quite enjoyed watching this kind of multilingual film this week, but it can't, because it sort of made me think of you. You know, I struggle to speak one language. How many languages do you speak again? Tell me again.
I speak pretty good Spanish and pretty good French. I wouldn't say they're incredible versions of those languages, but I can get by. I can travel pretty well. And then
and English, you're able to get by in that?
English, okay. For an English teacher, I don't do bad, but by no means perfect. Not an easy language to learn and or teach, for that matter, because the rules are so crazy. But
if there's anything that will persuade me not to commit a crime abroad, it's the notion that I might have to explain myself in some foreign court using my schoolboy French.
Exactly.
I can just imagine being like, having to go to court for a parking fine and ending up in prison for 20 years because I've somehow confessed a murder.
Yeah, you want to avoid that, because that way there's at least some record of what you've actually said in English as opposed to a record of what you mangled in some other language. So I would just stick to English.
Surely the mangling of the language is just an additional crime that they can put on your rap sheet, isn't it? Yes.
Then they'll really put you away.
I will deserve it, frankly.
Welcome, everyone, to the Two Reel Cinema Club. My name is Andres Lorente.
And I am James Rosica. And every episode on the Two Reel Cinema Club, we watch two movies. We watch a brand new movie out at cinemas or streaming, and then we compare it to an old movie that it shares some things in common with. Sometimes more in common than we realise. Sometimes we're perplexed why we've paired these two films together. I'm happy to say, weirdly, for the Two Reel Cinema Club, we have no Nazis this episode. Can't believe it.
Wow.
We have watched two courtroom dramas. We are completing our 2024 Oscars playlist by slotting the final film into place by watching the mostly French winner of what was the best original screenplay Oscar, Anatomy of a Fall. Yeah. And then we're comparing it to the film that it kind of riffs on and quotes from, and it is maybe a kind of remake of. More on that later. We have watched Otto Preminger's 1959 pioneering courtroom feature film, Anatomy of a Murder. So is it Preminger? How do you pronounce it?
Ooh, I think it's Preminger.
Preminger.
But I'm not certain, yeah.
That's what I've been saying.
Did you happen to see the trailer for... There's a 5-minute trailer for the film that Preminger sort of narrates. He introduces all the characters.
Oh.
And at that time, he still had a very thick accent. And I don't remember how he introduced himself, as if it was Preminger or Preminger, but I think it's Preminger.
Trailers used to be very different back then compared to now. These days, whenever I watch a trailer on YouTube, you have to watch like a little 3 or 4 second trailer of the trailer before the trailer actually starts.
Exactly, yeah.
It's the TikTok generation. Young people, what hope is there?
This one's kind of clever because Preminger swears all of the main actors in, and they have to say, I do.
Oh, cute.
I do. Yeah, they've got their hand on the Bible and everything, and they're saying, I do. So he did that trailer. It is kind of that age of, it's very thematic, where they're actually in the courtroom and he steps up and he's almost the judge and he starts swearing people in. So it's a very thematic, on the nose kind of trailer.
Yeah, on the nose is my middle name. Yeah. I like it. Okay, we will get to the Preminger movie in a short while. But first, we should talk about this year's Screenplay Oscar winner. Kind of not in the English language, but also kind of in the English language a bit.
Yeah.
Anatomy of a Fall. What can you tell me about it?
Well, I can tell you that, I just had you tell me about its Oscar nominations and success. You said that we are completing our Oscar run. Is this true? Have we seen that many?
I think we have now watched all of the Best Picture Oscar nominees.
Wow. That's fantastic.
And I'm not sure that this is the one that I would have given the Screenplay Award to, but we'll probably talk about that later.
Definitely not. We will talk about that later. And then tell me, I think it was probably in for a Best Foreign Film as well. Is that correct?
Oh, good question. I mean, I know that Zone of Interest won.
Yeah.
I'm sure it must have been.
Yeah.
But I didn't write that in my notes like a good podcaster, so I couldn't tell you for definite.
That's interesting. So I think you technically could have a Best Foreign Film also be Best Film.
It's happened very rarely, hasn't it?
Mm.
Parasite. Did that Parasite get best film not in the English language and best film at the same time?
That might have happened. We'll have to go back.
I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah, or just get the Two Reel Cinema Club listeners to page us. Use our pager number to tell us right now.
Yes. Yep.
Oh, really?
So Parasite did win Academy Award for Best Picture and Best International Feature Film.
Let me get to my notes here. Yes, okay, so Anatomy of a Fall, I believe it came out 2023, so it's just pretty fresh. I saw it online, I guess, yeah. So it's not in theaters. It was in theaters here. Directed by Justine Triet, I don't know.
Trier is what I think it is, yes.
Okay.
So she's...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, she's made Age of Panic, which I have not seen, In Bed with Victoria, which I have not seen, Sybil, which I have not seen. Yeah. I am not familiar with her work.
Is she French? I guess she is.
I think she is French.
I was definitely confused early on because I thought I'd heard that this was a Swiss film. I think it really is more of a French film. Of course, you've got Sandra Hüller, who we saw in Zone of Interest.
Yes, great year for her.
So you've got a German actor and then some French actors around her. So she plays Sandra Voiter. This is one of those films where actors play characters with their first names. I think that's very good for a director because on set you can just say Sandra. And then Sandra says, yes, I'm Sandra.
It also means you can kind of improvise a lot of your dialogue and get away with it, doesn't it?
Exactly. Swan Arlo plays Vincent Renzi, her lawyer. Samuel Thies is Samuel Maleski, her husband.
Not in the film very much.
He's not. I mean, he's dead for much of the film, but then he, in a non-zombie-like way, he comes back to life. And Milo Machado Grane as Daniel, their son.
And surely the outstanding performance from the film.
Yeah, Snoop, right?
Snoop, yeah. Messi the dog, who won the Palm Dog at the Cannes Film Festival. Apparently, it's a real award. I think he's probably the best actor in the film. The dog is fantastic.
Oh my God, his work is untouchable. Fantastic.
So, do you want to tell us the story?
Yeah, do that drum thing, and then I'll start telling you the story.
I love the drum thing.
This film, to a certain extent, it opens on a dog and closes on a dog.
Does.
We here at the club are kind of obsessed with openings and closings. Did I say clothings? Not clothings. Clothing. Opens on Sandra, though. She's having an interview with a young writer in their home, while her husband plays some very loud music. And I thought it was from the Jungle Book. I'm not sure what the song was. It seemed like a version, almost like a reggae or Caribbean-style version, steel drum version of the song in the Jungle Book. Did you pick that up or no?
It was going through my mind for ages, and eventually they say in the courtroom scene later on that it is a steel drum cover version of PIMP by 50 Cent.
Oh, okay.
Which means then that this film is pouring yet more money into the pockets of Dr. Dre, isn't it?
I was way off, but
continue.
It's prominent anyway. Let's say that much. He's blasting music on the stereo upstairs because he's renovating the part of their gorgeous mountain house. He's working the upstairs. She's downstairs. It becomes really too loud to record this interview with the young writer who's using her telephone to make a recording. A ball rolls down the stairs, and that's how we see Snoop the dog enter the film. He sort of comes down and chased after it. And Snoop, they have to cut the interview short. It's just like a young writer interviewing an older writer. Sandra's I guess a novelist, and she's had some success, more success than her struggling writer husband, Samuel. Snoop and Daniel go out for a walk. Daniel's their young son who's blind. He was blinded in an accident when he was a little bit younger. I think he plays around 11 years old at the beginning of this film.
Yep.
They go for a walk, beautiful mountain walk, and that's where we really start to see that Samuel's blind. Snoop is sort of a guide dog or a companion dog. They're out walking, and then when they return from the walk, they find Samuel, that's the father, dead in the snow after an apparent fall. There's this wonderful moment. This is, I think, Snoop's first masterstroke of acting. They are inconsolable. You can see that Snoop is longing for missing Samuel. and that he clearly knows that Samuel will be no more. Initially, there's a question of a third-party involvement, and some good doctors like James Rosica. I'm setting you up for Who Am I?
Oh, thank you.
Notice that there's head trauma. So that was a coroner scene, I suppose, right there. Speaking of coroner
Yeah, it was.
scenes. Yeah. Sandra is immediately a suspect because she is, of course, his wife, and she was in the house allegedly taking a nap during all the loud music, which seems kind of puzzling that she was able to sleep through that. Their house is kind of this construction zone because they are sort of struggling with money. Well, it's always good to have that money struggle in there for character motivation. And Samuel's been renovating it to sort of get an Airbnb space or something that they can rent into the upstairs, which is also the highest part of the house, which makes it easier to fall a great distance to the point where you could die. She's bruised. It's an indication of struggle, but she says, "I did not kill my husband," to her lawyer friend, Vincent Renzi. From there, an exposition on the dead guy kind of begins. He had white pills in his vomit one night as if to suggest a suicide.
Well, do you think we should ring the spoiler bell at this point?
Oh, really? Oh, I was going to go a little longer, but yeah, okay.
Oh, no, you keep going. No, you keep going. Good, okay. No.
Sort of doing an Act 1 thing, and then we'll talk more about pills and vomit later. Daniels sort of feels, after Daniel's blindness, Samuel sort of blames himself, and so does Sandra, and I think this becomes a real point of contention that I think Samuel was supposed to meet Daniel after school and escort him, and in the meantime he was hit by a car and ended up blind. There are some recreations of the crime scene that focuses on the volume, which you might know a little bit more about the legal system. It seemed a little strange to me. Of course, this is taking place in France, where they do things a little differently.
My main take-home from this film was that the French justice system just seems completely crazy in every aspect. Carry on, though, yeah.
Very dramatic. It's very showy, because we do get to the courtroom sooner than I would have wanted. I'm thinking, here's what occurred to me early on. I'm thinking this high mountain, steep stairs house with no railings, an unfinished workspace, is probably not the best environment in which to raise a blind 11-year-old boy. But maybe I'm just too inquisitive or something. So
I think you might be underestimating the powers of Snoop the dog, actually. He's able to save almost any situation.
Have we told you how good this dog is in the film?
We'll talk about the dog even more later.
So there were money problems that necessitated these reservations. The marriage was a little rough. We find out later there's little post-accidental sex between Sandra and Samuel. And she had a brief affair with a woman. And then she's released on bail. So she's originally thought of as being the primary suspect. She's released, and then we find out that Samuel also had some depression issues and was on antidepressants. That's about the setup that you need for the whole film, I think. So now I do feel comfortable ringing that spoiler bell.
We'll climb to the top of the house and ring the bell. Are you ready? Yes.
That's loud.
Nice acoustics up here. It is loud.
Rings across those alpine valleys.
Yes, beautiful. It'll be echoing for hours.
I get it. One of my first things, criticisms of the film, I thought that the music was going to have a bigger role because, Daniel's playing the piano a bunch and Samuel played this music really loud. And then Daniel and Sandra sit down at the piano. So there's a lot of music in here, and maybe it's just to sell Dr. Dre's music and his productions. I don't know. It comes off as a MacGuffin, though. And sooner than later, we see Daniel sort of, I think this is sort of the beginning of the second act. Daniel's playing at one point, and roughly he's playing, I don't know if it was the Bumblebee. He's playing this famous piece.
Is it Paganini, I think?
Is it Paganini? Okay, yeah, it's a variation on Paganini or something like that. And then it's difficult. For an 11-year-old blind kid, it's difficult. And then a year later, he's playing it better. So it ends up being just this sort of passage of time motif. I thought the music was going to be more of a key to what happened in the whole story. And I think maybe I'd read that or heard that, and I wasn't really impressed with the use of the music. And I thought it was going to do more. I guess that's it. It was like one of these, this wrong-footed me a little bit. I felt like, okay, it's got to do something with the music, and no.
Am I right? Is the music purely diegetic in the film? Is there no soundtrack music? I cannot recall any, but often that sort of thing washes over me. I didn't make a note.
I didn't make a note either.
I wonder whether maybe the the entire musical soundtrack is just
Yeah.
What Daniel plays on the piano or what the steel band plays over the laptop speakers.
It well could be, yeah. I remember seeing very few credits of music in the final credits, so you're probably right. I think there were 5 or 6 pieces total, and I think they were all sort of piano things, so there you go.
So we get to the hour point, and then we make it to court.
Oh, is it an hour? I think it was like 45 minutes. Did you write that?
Oh, is it? Okay, right. Maybe it was then. Okay.
I would think, normally I think that the normal convention is Act 3 happens in the courtroom or maybe midpoint on. It felt like most of this film is in the courtroom. It's all procedural in that sense. She's in the courtroom. Yeah. I think it gets there really early. There's some great moments in there. The camera goes back and forth at one point on Daniel, who's trying to follow the story. And it just sort of shows you how tortured he is and how confused he is because he's learning a lot of things about his parents in the courtroom. And this is actually where he learns key moments or key items like his father may have had a suicide attempt. That's why Sandra makes it sound anyway. And I think that maybe gets into his head. It's one of these things that obviously it's a light bulb moment for him. Samuel was weaning himself off of antidepressants because we hear from his psychiatrist. He was struggling with his writing. And of course, Sandra blames Samuel for blaming himself for Daniel's accident. She makes that kind of clear, even though that doesn't sound clear at all. The midpoint for me is, we were talking about languages. It's her switch to English in a French court. It's a very French affair, and she's really being interrogated in French. And then at one point, she just can't do it anymore, so she goes to English. It's not like the most dramatic midpoint, but that's what I had labeled as a midpoint. Did you see something that was more midpointy than that?
I'm looking at my notes now, and I wonder whether the midpoint I wrote down here was that the point where there's a little scene between the judge of the case and Daniel in her chambers, where she kind of wonders out loud, well, maybe you shouldn't be in the room for the rest of the case.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder whether actually that's kind of the midpoint, because this is the first time that people question whether Daniel's contribution might swing or change the case. And this is almost like the first time that anybody realistically asks, what's the best thing for the boy here?
Yeah.
This is one of the things that kind of surprises me about how crazy the French court system is, because it appears that you can be extremely rude to an 11-year-old boy in the French court system and nobody minds. They kind of put him through the ringer a bit. It's like the most notable cinematography in the film is this quite long, sustained shot where Daniel is being asked questions by both the prosecuting and the defending lawyers, and the camera just kind of like swings through 90 degrees. Exactly. He looks to his left, and then he looks to his right, and it looks to his left again. Yep. And this notion that he is being kind of bombarded from both sides, and he's standing up to it, but also he's kind of a bit claustrophobic, and is he manipulated or is he simply being analyzed? That's one of the bits of cinematography that stands out. So I would have put the midpoint at the judge asking Daniel whether or telling Daniel that she's going to exclude him, and Daniel saying, "No, I want to be part of the. I want to be in the court." But I think that happens at almost the same time.
That's what I was going to say. It's almost the same time. So it's kind of notable that Daniel doesn't really speak English. He seems to understand it pretty well. But I don't really hear him speak much English in this film. So it's also when she makes that switch to English, it might be in part to try and deflect some of the news coming at him to a foreign language and an interpreter who's going to spell it out for him, as opposed to hearing these details from his own mother in French. So it's kind of a poignant moment. You have to dig kind of deep to get terribly poignant on it, but it is that's why it feels like a midpoint, even though it's I don't know. It's sort of a very subtle midpoint, we would say, I think. I agree with you on like the consideration of Daniel, because the worst case scenario for him is he loses both parents. One has died and one is going to be in prison forever. The best case scenario he gets is a few years more with Snoop, and then his mother is with him for the rest of his life, or rest of her life anyway, right? So that did strike me as that, this is a pretty cruel case, and the evidence against Sandra is mostly just that she's the only person who was in the house when Samuel falls.
But then, like all courtroom pictures, there has to be like a big revelation, isn't it? And they kind of they squeeze that in. I guess this counts as like the end of the second act, the start of the third act, when they find or play back a recording from Samuel's phone.
Yeah. So he had been recording a lot of conversations, including one that sort of ends in violence with Sandra. And she explains that maybe he was recording parts of their lives for book material. He was obviously struggling as a writer, so he's looking for inspiration. And so to a certain extent, it was like maybe he was drumming up tension in their relationship to see where that would lead him in his writing. There's a suggestion that she says she borrowed a scene and he knew about it, but she borrowed some material from his book that he never finished in one of her books. It's quite a sensational trial because I guess she's moderately successful or famous writer. There's some jingoistic overtones in there because she's German and they'd lived together in England. And he's true French and he was coming back to his hometown, I guess, and she was sort of forced to move with him. There's some sort of homophobic lines of inquiry too to make Sandra seem guilty because she's slept with a woman. She claims just a couple of times, and there's no evidence that she had long-term relationships. It's sort of glossed over, but those two things are in there, and they're both they're kind of low blows, I thought. But hey, that's maybe again what the court system is. So they're sort of exploring and exposing personality as opposed to really going into facts. And this is a big contrast with the other film because this film, there's some facts, and that's why it seemed but even the facts are sort of dramatized or dramatic in the sense that they recreated the scene of Daniel. Could he hear the argument if the music was blasting, and then they dropped dummies down to hit the shed underneath Samuel where maybe he hit his head before he bled to death on the ground. So there's a lot of drama in there, and a very, very dramatic prosecutor in the courtroom as well.
Who bizarrely is wearing, like the prosecutor is wearing like a Santa outfit. This really distracted me through the whole film. That he's wearing, not a black gown, but a red gown with white trim, and it really looks like he's just taken off a Santa outfit. Obviously, times are pretty tight if you're a prosecuting lawyer in France, so maybe he's doing a Santa gig on the side.
But I think he did at times. Did he have a wig too? There were some wigs in there, I think, right?
He needed a wig, didn't he? He shaved his head, I think. If you look that actor up online, he doesn't normally have a shaved head, actually. I think they clearly shaved in his head. Yeah. Shaved his head. Shaven? That's not a verb, is it? Shaven? Shaven. They'd shoved his head.
Oh man, that guy. Poor guy, he had a shoved head.
But to make him look like like a threatening skinhead.
Yeah.
So I think I'm guessing, if they covered it up then with a judicial wig or something, that would spoil the effect. Yeah,
it's hard to say if that was an intentional costume design thing or if they had a very small budget for the robes for the prosecutors. Daniel finally, he asks to testify again. So he's already testified once when you had that scene where he's really tortured in between the prosecution and the defense. But he asks his mother to spend the weekend elsewhere because they're not in the same house. That way he's probably, the idea is that he's not being influenced by her in any way. I think we can talk about the money scene. The money scene for me is that Daniel has this idea of doing a test dosing of Snoop.
Yeah.
To see if there would be pills in his vomit. Because he'd seen, I guess, Snoop maybe showing some interest in, oh God, can we do this on the Cinema Club? Eating his father's vomit.
So we've discussed worse than that, haven't we, I think?
I guess so. So it is a sad scene because he overdoses Snoop, nearly kills him. He has this guardian who's sort of protecting him from his mother's influence. So they're in the house together. So it's just, he just wanted to see if, yes, possibly the pills would be there and if his mother's story about finding white pills undigested in Samuel's vomit as a part of a suicide attempt really rang true, if that was logical. And he found out, that's for sure.
I must say, I found that scene where the dog eats the pills and then kind of goes comatose. That was, for me, the most emotional scene in the whole film.
Oh, no, that was it. I agree with you. That's why it's not a money shot; it's a money scene.
Couldn't believe. Oh my God, they've killed the dog! I couldn't believe it.
You can't kill that dog.
Dog? What? That's outrageous. And I was quite moved when the dog kind of pukes up and starts to revive again. But it's astonishing acting by the dog. Yeah. I don't know what they have done to get the dog to act a little bit dazed and confused.
Well, I've never been so happy to see dog vomit as that time around.
Yes.
Ooh.
To be fair, anybody who owns a dog will know that dog vomiting is no big deal. Kiki came up to our bedroom, did a little vomit the other day, and then just walked back downstairs again. I'm glad she thinks that my bedroom is the ideal place for her to puke up. But dogs just puke all the time, don't they?
She's got an acting career ahead of her, for sure. It does lead to this interesting thing where Daniel remembers Samuel talking about days when Snoop would be gone, and he starts to understand it as Samuel prepping his own son, Daniel, for the day when his father will be gone. So it's sort of an allusion to attempted suicide. Sandra's acquitted largely on Daniel's testimony. Closing scene, again, we come back to the dog. Snoop finally goes to sleep with her. It's like accepting of Sandra and bringing comfort to her. And that's why I said we begin on the dog and we end on the dog. And it's interesting because we almost lost the dog in the process.
I mean, that opening image, it's a ball that falls down some stairs.
It is, yeah. And
then the dog comes back and kind of like rescues the ball.
Yep.
And it's only I got to the end of the film and I realised, that is kind of like the whole film in microcosm, that it is the dog descending from the sky and saving the day. That's exactly what happens in the whole of the film. It's the dog.
Anatomy of a Fall.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's technically, like good opening images could tell you the whole story.
Yeah, yep.
That's the spoon, what is it called? The elevator pitch or the spoonful pitch or whatever they call it.
The spoonful of elevators. That's right.
It's a very, very small elevator.
The teaspoon pitch, is it?
Yes, teaspoon pitch.
I've got one big question for you.
Oh, God.
Do you think she did it?
No.
Oh, okay.
I really don't. I guess we're supposed to think that, and maybe I'm just too trusting. She says, "I did not kill my husband." That's a big moment early in the film. No, I was interested that they didn't. I mean, they eventually get to the suicide angle, and they explore that. They don't. A lot of people don't really want to admit that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I guess they just never considered that it's a fall. This guy was on and off antidepressants. He's working upstairs. He's got the music up loud. It's way up there. It looked like it was about a 30-foot fall. Maybe he just fell. I don't see how that's not a possibility. So,
yeah,
it's one of these situations where there's sort of ginning up all this possible, marital conflict and domestic violence and pinning it on her. I didn't get the sense that was the case. And if that were the case, if she did do it, I think that they should have made more of it, I guess.
I mean, cinematically, I wrote in my notes Schrodinger's murder, because we get just a couple of seconds of reconstruction of both of the scenarios, don't we?
Yeah.
There is a little flashback glimpse of the couple arguing on a balcony, and then there is another little flashback glimpse of him jumping out of the top story window.
Yeah.
And so the camera tells us both options.
Yeah.
And I got to the end of the film, and I was slightly waiting for the final plot point.
Yeah.
The credits rolled, and I realized, oh God, we're not going to find out whether it definitely was this or that. So it is deliberately ambiguous. I've spoken to one friend who was extremely frustrated by this ambiguous ending, tearing his hair out, saying, "Just tell us, please, one way or the other." What a cop out! But I don't know whether you agree or whether you think that ambiguity leaves it feeling a little bit sort of richer and more interesting.
No, I would not describe it as richer or more interesting as a result. No. It's more like story not telling as opposed to storytelling. We did an ambiguous ending popcorn, didn't we? Not long ago.
We did. Yeah, endings are hard.
I didn't pay a whole lot of money for this movie because I streamed it, but jeez, if I go in there and buy a ticket, I want to know the story, all of it. I want to know the ending. She didn't feel like she was capable of it, honestly.
Okay.
I don't think it was ever a question. That was kind of the problem with this film for me, is there really weren't a lot of questions, and there weren't terribly satisfying answers for the few questions that there really were in the film. So,
I have a different opinion about the ending, but I think I'm going to come back to that when we synthesize, because I think it sort of depends on talking a little bit about the other film.
Okay.
I did write down that really this film ought to be our favourite of the Oscar winners simply because it got the screenplay gong.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you. I personally did not think that the screenplay was a great deal to get excited about for this film.
Agreed. Yeah.
There's a like a big scene. I think maybe the kind of the big writerly scene is the argument between the two main characters.
Yeah.
The argument that Samuel has recorded on his phone. So we see that argument play out. I don't know what you think. In my limited experience, I think those scenes are actually pretty easy to write. I think, you have your two characters, you put them in a room, they're already kind of bristling, and it all just comes out. And it's like, and like the dialogue, you're right, doesn't even have to be particularly clever or pithy. It can be a mess because it's an argument and people aren't always completely coherent. Mm-hmm. I think actors love these kinds of scenes because you get to be kind of big and dramatic and you get to shout and then go really quiet and you get to use all of your skills. And it's probably really fun doing kind of like an argument between two lovers.
Yeah.
But I personally am not a great admirer of that kind of scene. I think they're a bit showy, but I don't think they're particularly challenging to write. And I don't think they're the best example of the screenwriter's trade. I do think that Daniel is well written, though.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, his parents are kind of so-so, but Daniel, I think he's been skillfully written. I think it's difficult to write an 11-year-old without either kind of coming out as condescending or coming out as being way too old and mature. And so kind of steering that line and writing an 11-year-old appropriate, I think that probably is a challenge. Maybe that's the reason why it got the gong, I don't know. But I'm not sure that I'm super impressed with the adult characters in the film.
I would agree with you. I think that the big scene that you're talking about is very theatrical. It's not cinematic by any means. They're drinking in the middle of the afternoon. There's not a whole lot to show because they're just sitting around the kitchen, eating pasta, drinking wine, so they bring in the alcohol element to make it a little messier. And then it's a shame to me because so much of the film is very theatrical. These courtroom things are just made for the stage, right? They're hard to pull off on the screen. So this film has a lot of just intentionally stagey moments to it. And I think as a result, it doesn't really reflect a lot of great screenwriting because a lot of screenwriting is what's the picture? What's the picture that you're putting on screen in order to tell that story? And you're absolutely right. I mean, I find that writing dialogue for the stage is a whole lot easier than writing dialogue for the screen because if you're writing dialogue for the screen, you're sort of intentionally writing this stuff that people can live without. They don't have to understand it if the actors are doing something or the director is helping the actors to show something of the story. So I agree with you entirely, and I also agree with you, Daniel. It's he's probably a really good actor for that age as well. You're already working with this pretty strong metaphor of blind justice, right? Like he understands it on this intuitive or innate level that sighted people would not somehow, or he's got these intuitions that help him see the truth. But he does a great job, and he's got a great wingman in Snoop. I think Snoop's a boy dog, but I don't really know. They talked about him. So he's got a good wingman or wing pet in Snoop. So yeah, I wouldn't say, hey, this is a great screenplay. That award always, puzzles me a little bit because I don't think people are reading the screenplays. I think they're seeing the film and imagining, oh, it's a good story, or this is the best story.
You know what? I will bet you a beer that there is a successful stage adaptation of Anatomy of a Fall.
Yeah.
In a theatre somewhere within 2 years from now. It's asking for it, isn't it? It would make a really good play. I think it would be very effective on stage. Maybe more effective than it is on screen.
Yeah. Will the musical be good, though? You can have a musical after you have a play. I think the thing that makes me feel this is not a great screenplay is it's really an underwhelming story, ultimately. It's kind of flimsy in terms of its plot and a lot of the things that happen. They're gems. They're these little gems that are left to us that really never amount to much. Like there's some blood. There's this affair, but it gets washed over pretty quickly. There's a little bit of sexual tension with the Renzi character, her lawyer, because it seems like they know each other from the past. They've been brought back together. Sandra's ethics are kind of there, too, to paint her as a possible murderer, but they're not that strong. There's the guardian who takes care of Daniel and sort of keeps him at a distance from his mother when they're still living together during the trial. There's the music. It's the best use of vomit since The Exorcist. I think we've already talked about that a little bit. So there are these gems left around, but they don't really add up to much. They're not really used very much. I think of great screenwriting as you're putting only what is really necessary in there. Sure, you can have like a MacGuffin or a wrong footing of the audience, but none of these things really add up to a whole lot. And they don't, the lawyers they don't really spend that much time working on points that take you to a crime one way or another. So it's very funny that it almost feels very flimsy because at the end, Daniel comes in. Maybe they've tried to plant into his head and our heads that it was a suicide because of what we've seen with the dog and the vomit and all that. So we're not sure. He's an 11-year-old. He's probably very vulnerable to outside influence, and he's heard these things, and he starts putting that story together, and then his testimony basically ends the trial really fast, by the way.
Yes.
So I don't know. It doesn't all add up to being really strong. I could see that happening, and that's why she's eventually cleared and acquitted. But it's not strong in terms of taking its own resources and putting them to maximum use.
Really, an awful lot of the trial is just like a large-scale state-sponsored character assassination, isn't it?
Yeah.
They read little bits out of her book, and they. This is my question about the crazy French court system. I simply can't believe it. That like the witnesses are allowed to directly argue with the plaintiff, and then and then like the lawyers are allowed to just jump up and start arguing with each other and with the witnesses and tell each other to shut up. I mean, it seems insane.
Yeah,
I'm sure that a British court and probably an American court as well wouldn't have people talking to each other quite like this. Everything has to go through the bench, doesn't it? Everything has to go through the judge. So I think it's fairly remarkable that people are just allowed to address each other directly.
Yeah.
It seems a bit mad.
Well, justice is blind, but maybe French justice should be deaf also.
Between that and best use of vomit in a film for many years, you have given them two perfect quotes for the DVD box.
Oh, goodness. It's a long film. For its content, I would have wanted 2 hours and less on that one. It was 2 hours and 40 minutes. I think it's longish at the very least.
It's too long.
And I was told by a lot of people that I more or less trust that it was really good. So I came in thinking, this is going to be one of the best films of the year. This is the best screenplay. So this is going to be good. I'm excited. And I wasn't. I really felt it was kind of overrated. And it was disappointing. I felt like it was disappointing for sure.
It feels a little bit like a fairly small scale, not over-ambitious French film that would probably get international distribution.
Yeah.
It could have been made 20 years ago. It would have been, a nice small scale French film that would ended up with a box in your local DVD store. It doesn't really feel like it has the caliber of, a film that should be scooping up Oscars and getting very powerful international attention. So I'm a little bit surprised.
Well said. Hear, hear.
Good for them. Good for them. I tell you what, whenever we see a film where there's an awful lot of policemen milling around, I'm always checking the backs of their jackets because I rather suspect at least one of them must be representing the Cliché Squad.
Cliché Squad.
There should be, I think, you know how you always see that the no animals were hurt on the filming, that someone from the International Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals is there. I think we need a Cliché Squad member on set all the time.
Just keeping tabs on these films. Well, some films will need several members of the Cliché Squad at all times. on a kind of rolling rota. The thing about courtroom dramas is they are tropey, aren't they? Mm-hmm. So, when you go to see a courtroom drama, there's going to be a defender and a prosecutor and a judge who throws a spanner in the work and some surprise evidence and a last-minute witness who changes everything. I mean, I wrote in my notes, this must be the most rules-based of all dramatic forms. Yeah. But I don't know whether it's necessarily a cliche. It's just a reflection of what the form is. It's a very rigid form, these courtroom dramas. But you kind of know what you're getting. I suppose I don't know whether that counts as a cliche. I did write down one cliche though, which is just writers. It's another film about blooming writers. Yes. It's about the insecurity of writers.
Thank you. Yeah.
About writer's block. And it's another of those films which kind of sort of believes that the greatest pain known to humankind is writer's block. It reminded me a bit. There's a British comedian called Dominic Holland, who's father of Tom Holland, the Spider-Man actor, who grew up just a couple of miles away from here, actually. But when he used to do stand-up, I did one gig, I think, with Dominic Holland back when I did stand-up, and he used to do this gag about how he would say that he was confident there was no greater pain than standing barefoot on a plug, and then his wife objected to this by saying, well, what about giving birth? So he said he was prepared to admit, yes, there's no greater pain than giving birth while standing barefoot on a plug. But it's like, I don't know, I feel like this film wants you to believe that the pain of writer's block is greater even than childbirth. Oh my God, it's so painful, which strikes me as a bit of a hoary old cliche.
I hear you. Yes. I saw a couple. Some of them are stereotypes, though, which I think kind of count as cliches. So I'll start with those.
Oh, yes. Oh, no, the cliche's got to write you up a ticket for a stereotype, definitely.
Good. Germans as cold and unfeeling. I think a lot of Sandra's guilt is based on the fact that she's German and she doesn't really process these emotions in the same way. She's a very logical character. Just very, very no nonsense, sensible, and that makes her guilty of murder, which is crazy. Also, non-heterosexuals as deviants, and oh my God, they're having affairs, they're having sex all the time. So of course she was having an affair, and that meant that she had to kill her husband in order to be with her new lover. To a certain extent, the lawyer who never wins. Which I think we kind of see this in the other film as well. Like at one point when they win the case, they go out drinking and eating in what looks like someone's living room, but I guess it's a restaurant somewhere. And he says, do you? Oh, I think Sandra asks the team of lawyers, "Hey, do you guys always celebrate like this after you win?" And he says, "No, we never win." So it's always the underdog who comes to the defense of the poor accused and rescues everyone. So there's definitely, it's a fairly deep cliche, I suppose. But the one I will pull up is, because we've seen it a little bit in the last year when we saw the Argentine film The Substitute, I think it came up. You just talked about it at length in Origin, and that is the house under construction metaphor. And in Origin, you see the story sort of get complete by actually starting from a damaged house and bringing it to a place where it can be sold. The Substitute, it's all about a completely incomplete life, like the construction's never done. And this house is just exposed, completely unfinished, dangerous. So they're using the house, which is, again, this is so theatrical. This would be a great set in a sense that if the, on stage you saw this house under renovation that's just never going to be complete because Samuel's life is never going to be complete. So, I mean, it's a fine line between good storytelling and cliche, but I think here it is used as an element. So I don't want to say it's a hard cliche, but it's definitely in there as a metaphor.
We've seen it before and we've seen it recently. So not quite as impressive as perhaps we were led to believe. Some bright moments and a great dog. Maybe that's worth the price of admission. Shall we have a break? Let's have a break. We'll clear up the vomit, and then we will come back and discuss Anatomy of a Murder.
Just so the audience knows, the vomit is on your side of the pond. I have cat vomit occasionally, but the dog vomit, no.
This episode, we're sponsored by the MBA podcast. They sent us this little sheet to read out, so I'm going to read that out now. So they say, business is changing and you need to change with it. At the MBA podcast, we'll be talking to people across the business world, business thinkers, CEOs, sociopaths, cult leaders, and evil masterminds. Wait a second, what is that? Well, I think there might be some typos on this. Wait a second. Who are all harnessing change to make their business grow more evil. Do you think that's an autocorrect? Do you think more lively? Do you think they mean... Okay, well, it goes on anyway. Okay. So they say, learn how productivity soars when companies contravene basic human rights. use AI to replace workers outright. Do you think they mean improve working conditions? I'm just going to follow what it says.
Yeah,
follow our 4-step program to motivate the stragglers left in your business. Veiled threats, violent outbursts, eroded pay, and passive-aggressive emails. I'm not sure these guys are on the up and up, actually.
No.
Okay, it says here, harness the power of unrealistic KPIs and learn where to get money when even Deutsche Bank won't give you a loan. All this and more on the MBA podcast. That stands for Malevolent Business Advice. Okay, right. There we go. So the MBA podcast is proud to sponsor the Two Real Cinema Club. Okay. I'm actually not sure how I feel about that.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
On the other hand, a buck's a buck, isn't it?
I think that's the whole point of the MBA, right? However you can earn it.
Yeah, well, we've cashed the check, so
And we are back and heavy in the pockets because we have more money because we've learned a little things from MBA.
MBA.
We're also come back because we're going to talk about Anatomy of a Murder, 1959 film from Otto. What do you think, Jimmy?
I'm going to stick with Preminger. Okay. I'm going to listen to your advice.
Okay, let's say Preminger.
So, 1959 film based on that 1957 novel.
Yeah.
Written by Robert Traver, which is the pen name of John Volker, who was a judge on the Michigan Supreme Court.
That's right.
The book is based on a real murder case. He was the defending lawyer, and the story of the real case played out very similar to the story that we see in the Preminger film. So it's almost ripped from the headlines, really.
Yeah.
Script was written by Wendell Mays. Not super familiar with his work. I had to look him up. So he wrote Spirit of St. Louis, or it'll be St. Louis, will it?
St. Louis, and I think that was also Jimmy Stewart, but I'm not sure.
Ah, right, okay.
Yeah.
Later in his career, he wrote Death Wish, the Charles Bronson picture, which scored 100.
And you're a big Bronson fan.
Yeah, 100 sequels. We liked Charles Bronson on this podcast. Also wrote The Poseidon Adventure.
Yeah.
Which was kind of the beginning of that kind of 70s and 80s disaster movie kind of trend. So he's responsible for a lot.
Yeah, it's a decent career.
James Stewart, always great to see him. Lee Remick, Ben Gazzara, great cast.
Yeah.
George C. Scott turns up in an early role. We saw him not very long ago in Strangelove.
Yeah.
So great to see him on screen.
Yeah.
And also very enjoyable, Duke Ellington turns up. He provides the soundtrack and he turns up as a little cameo as a band leader.
Yeah.
Great cast, but I didn't choose it. You did. Do you want to tell me, why did you choose this film to accompany Anatomy of a Fall?
Do you have any other questions for me, counsel?
Need I explain? Anatomy of a Murder, Anatomy of a Fall. I felt like there was some hijinks going on, so I have seen this film a couple of times, probably on VHS both times, as far as I know. And it just made me think that it would be another good courtroom drama to see. I remember liking it. I remember liking the style. This is a really stylish film. It feels like a film noir, but it has these wonderful comic moments as well, that are they're not necessarily subtle, but Preminger doesn't like shed a lot of attention on them. It's more or less they're just one-off lines from the judge is quite funny and the lawyers are funny. It's wonderful compared to the courtroom scene in Anatomy of a Fall, where it's very serious and very dramatic. There are a lot of light moments in Murder, the scene courtroom. So I just thought it would go well. And I don't know if it does or not, but maybe you'll shed some light on that.
I think it does go really well. I'm not super familiar with Otto Preminger's work. I did a kind of quick little bit of reading. So he was born in Austria-Hungary in 1905. Interestingly, now the place where he was born is part of Ukraine.
Oh, wow.
His father was a lawyer.
Yeah.
They lived in Vienna after World War I, and he became an actor and a theatre director. And Daryl Zanuck invited him to Hollywood to work for Fox in 1935. So he came to Hollywood, but initially struggled, and he was sacked, returned to the theatre for a while, then came back and directed Laura. I haven't seen it, but I do love the theme song. I know there's a great version by Ella Fitzgerald. Laura was a hit, and he went on and he directed like a slew of Hollywood Golden Age pictures, a lot of noirs, Fallen Angel, Where the Sidewalk Ends. He directed Man with the Golden Arm, Porgy and Bess, Bonjour Tristesse. He was a real kind of envelope pusher. I wrote in my notes here a 1950s edgelord, which is probably not entirely accurate. But Man with the Golden Arm was about heroin addiction. Yeah. He directed a film, Advice and Consent, I think.
Advice and Consent, Henry Fonda, yeah.
Right, about homosexuality. Yeah. There's a lot of controversial material in this film, Anatomy of a Murder, which I'm sure we will talk about.
And this is a fairly graphic film. It's surprising for 1959, but
yes,
they go into a lot of detail about underclothing and sex.
Yes,
it's good. I mean, I think it's good
stuff that wasn't was not talked about in 1959. The only other little note I've made was that this film. So I've always got time for James Stewart. He might be my favourite screen actor ever.
Yeah.
This film was released the year after Vertigo, which is possibly the greatest film ever made.
Yeah.
I'm sitting beneath a poster for it right now. Mm-hmm. Shall I tell you the story of Anatomy of a Murder?
Please do.
So, for people who haven't seen Anatomy of a Murder, it is a 1959 black and white courtroom drama based on a true story. As the film opens, ex-small-town district attorney Paul Beagler, who is James Stewart, he's Polly to his friends, returns from a fishing trip to find that he has been asked to provide a defence for Frederick Mannion, played by Ben Gazzara. He's an army... Now, lieutenant or lieutenant? I think in this country we say lieutenant.
We do here as well. Yeah.
Oh, do you? Or maybe we say lieutenant in this country then. I think I always get it wrong. So I'm going to stick with lieutenant then. Okay, lieutenant. I think maybe we say lieutenant.
Now, why would you say that? It makes no sense. Lieutenant, like left in the direction, or left-handed, right-handed, lieutenant? You're left holder?
Are you implying that the English language makes sense?
No, but it's interesting that neither the English of Great Britain nor the English of the United States makes any sense.
No, it's true. But it's a French word, isn't it? It's a French word that we have bludgeoned.
It's placeholder, right? Lieu is a place. Tenant is holding.
It's the holder?
Placeholder. So
he's the holder of the place.
You're saying holding left if you say lieutenant. But that's mixing two languages as well. It just makes no sense to me.
Why couldn't he have been a sergeant? Yeah, that would have made my life so much easier. So Lieutenant Mannion has murdered a bar owner called Barney Quill in front of a crowd of customers at the bar.
Yeah.
So Polly goes to see Mannion in jail. Mannion is cool and confident, and he is sure that the unwritten law will acquit him because it turns out Quill, he tells Polly, raped Mannion's wife, Laura, who's played by a young Lee Remick. Mm-hmm. So Polly tells him, well, there is no unwritten law, buddy. You're toast. There's only one defence that you can try, which is temporary insanity. But... was Mannion really temporarily insane, and can Polly prove it? So Polly and his heavily drinking legal buddy Parnell set out to win the case. The film is 2 hours, 40 minutes long, and after about the 1 hour mark, I think it's 58 minutes in, something like that, the movie is almost entirely set in the Michigan courtroom, where Polly argues it out with the DA and with a hotshot prosecutor from out of town, Dancer, who is played by a youthful George C. Scott. So you said you've seen it twice before. I had never seen it. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. This is so George C. Scott. This is 3 years before Strangelove. Is Strangelove like 62?
Something like that. Yeah, okay. Something like that. Yes,
he's so young, and he's like this expert lawyer that comes in from Lansing, which is it's not a big city, but compared to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, it's the big city. And they make a lot of that he's from Lansing, not Detroit, Lansing. He's great. He comes on. It's nice to have that introduction of a character about halfway through, right?
Yes, yeah.
He comes in maybe a little less than halfway through the film, and the current DA is sort of a bumbling, happy-go-lucky guy, and I think there is important exposition that was the job that Paulie, Jim Stewart's character, had before. I don't know if it was an elected office. I forget if he was. I
think it is an elected office.
So he lost an election. Now he's a fisherman. He spends more time fishing than he spends lawyering, I guess. So he's sort of going up against his old office. He's never been a defense lawyer before, I guess. It's more of a prosecutor. So they bring in this other gun, and it happens to be George C. Scott from Lansing.
Yeah, they sort of two team it, don't they? Or it's like tag teaming or something, isn't it?
Yes.
The two prosecution lawyers. You take this one, I'll take that one.
And it's funny to see Jimmy Stewart, he uses his their experience, even though he's more experienced. He says, I can't go against both of these lawyers at the same time. He's sort of playing down his own chances of winning the case, and it works because the judge says, okay, you can't both be talking all the time. You've got to take turns. Just a nice bit of character work there. But you're right. I think Jimmy Stewart just carries films so well. Just
so much charm dripping off the screen. Yeah, always so watchable. I've learned my lesson. I'm going to talk about the opening image.
Yeah.
The film gets off to a great start because it has a combination of Saul Bass graphics and Duke Ellington music.
Oh, God.
So it's an intoxicating opening sequence. Just some cutout shapes in black and white. But it sets the tone.
Yeah.
I don't know if you stopped 100 people in the street, I don't know how many of them could name Saul Bass, but out of all the people who designed Hollywood titles, he is the only person who is a household name, and it's for a reason, isn't it?
Great. Yeah, it's great. It's a great opening.
The proper opening image of the film, I think it's basically Jimmy Stewart driving out of the darkness.
Yep.
So he's coming back from a fishing trip, and I was trying to figure, is the idea he's kind of illuminating the way with his car headlights? It's like he's either coming out of the darkness or he's bringing light back into the town, or at least he's casting his light in search for the truth. I think that is the notion that they are aiming for, and I think that does sort of pay out in the themes of the rest of the film.
Yeah.
And apart from driving into town, the first thing we really see Jimmy Stewart do, his first action as a character, is to gut some fish, isn't he?
Yeah.
So he's kind of like dissecting open these fish and washing them out and really getting to their core.
Yeah.
Again, which is kind of what he does for the case. So it's a nice, clever little setup for what his character is and what he's going to do.
Yeah. And he's known in the town too. It's lovely. He waves to one of the bar owners outside of the street or whatnot. He's obviously a known quantity in the town. And he's gutted a lot of fish, too. Later on, we learned how many fish are in that refrigerator of his. And, again, tells you what kind of fisherman he is and how good he is at gutting for the truth, I guess.
I made a few notes on structure. So I was saying earlier, the film doesn't enter the courtroom until the 58-minute mark. Mm-hmm. But then after that, rarely leaves it. And it's 2 hours 40. It is long.
It is long, yeah.
It is a long film. I guess kind of like first act turning points when Polly meets Laura for the first time at 13 minutes. Then he meets Mannion at 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And Mannion at last kind of admits, I was crazy at 36 minutes. So he kind of formulates his defense at 36 minutes, which I think is probably the end of the first act, I would guess. It's a fairly classic structure, 3 acts. There's a long act 2 in the courtroom, and then I reckon that like the third act probably starts when Parnell, who is Polly's buddy, he returns from a fact-finding trip to Canada. Mm-hmm. And he literally crashes back into the story by crashing his car as he returns to town. So I'm guessing that is the beginning of the end. There's all the kind of some of the usual kind of hero's journey beats. Polly refuses the call for like the first half hour of the film. Yeah, there's the usual parade of allies and enemies and obstacles. There is a kind of all is lost moment towards the end. I mean, it has a lot of those beats, which is probably why, as a story, it works so effectively.
And stylistically, it's great. I mean, the shadows. This is a black and white film where lighting was so important, and it's quite harsh. It casts a lot of shadows, but it makes sense for this film. I mean, normally if you're making a film, you don't want to have lots of shadows on walls, but Preminger does it very intentionally. And I think just compared to the other film a little bit, I won't compare too much, but there's just a lot of information in the shots. You've got the tone is really clear in this film, even though Preminger's able to really play with it a little bit in terms of the humor. But the tone is there, so it definitely feels like a murder story. It's got this darkness, it's got this light, so it really works as a wonderful noir film. There's a lot of chiaroscuro going on, if I use that correctly. It's masterfully made. It's a beautiful film. So there's a lot of great visual storytelling here, which I don't think you see in the other film or in many films in general.
And as you were kind of saying, there's a lot of edgy stuff in this film. So apparently this is like the first film that was freely using words like, I've made a list here in my notes, climax, spermatogenesis, panties, rape, completion. This is pretty edgy, graphic stuff for 1959.
Yeah. It's pre-sexual revolution. I mean, this precedes the sexual revolution by 6, 7, 8 years, something like that. Anyway,
and I think it's probably not the only thing which is shocking to audiences at the time. That it has been described as probably the finest pure trial movie ever made. Was the quote that I found. So I mean, there had been legal dramas before this. There was 12 Angry Men.
Yeah.
In 1957, there was Witness for the Prosecution in 1957. It's based on an Agatha Christie play.
Yeah.
But this apparently was the first courtroom drama that attempted to be realistic.
Yeah.
So, it's based on a book written by an actual defense lawyer about an actual case which he actually defended.
Yeah.
And these days, we have seen courtroom scenes 1,000 times. We have seen objection and sustained and 5-minute recess and court is adjourned and bang, bang, bang. We've seen that so many times that we know all those things. We've seen Lionel Hutz and The Simpsons now. Mess everything up and be a crappy lawyer and tell the judge, I move for a bad trial thingy. So we know all that stuff, but this is like the beginning. This is where all that came from.
Yeah.
That wasn't sort of common cinematic lingua franca until this film, I think.
Yeah, and the characters are characters as opposed to caricatures. I think that's key for me. Like, they do have humanity. They have sense of humor. The part of the film where they're deciding what word to use for panties is fantastic. And all three lawyers are at the bench with the judge. That's three men having no idea how to use the word panties in court. And they settle on panties, but they say a number of funny things about it. And, they're ignorant about that. It's very human. And they do have jokes. It's not that they're absolute enemies. It's more that they're trying to work out this case as a group. And they're cracking jokes here and there. They've got sense of humor. They're also very serious. They're gifted at what they do. But they're pretty well rounded as characters, as opposed to a lot of the stuff you see on television in particular. It's just standard prosecutor, standard defense lawyer, standard judge. It's not very interesting as a result. So this is obviously an indication that it was written by someone who knew what they were doing.
The judge especially is a real standout. We might talk about him a little bit later on, I think. But first of all, I think we should ring the spoiler bell. We'll have our usual debate. Can you spoil a film from 1959?
Yes, absolutely. This one you can.
Yeah,
I can spoil anything. If you let me talk about it, I'm going to spoil it. So yes, ring that bell.
There we go. There's the bell. Order in the court. There is a big elephant in the room. So although I did really enjoy it, it's kind of groundbreaking. There are elements of real modernity creeping through in this otherwise sometimes old-fashioned noirish film. There is an elephant in the room, though, which is its treatment of women, isn't it?
Yeah.
So a lot of the plot revolves around whether or not Laura, Lee Remick's character, has been a victim of rape. But her status as a victim of a crime is never taken seriously by any of the characters on the screen. Nobody really takes the rape seriously, not even her. It's sort of shrugged off. She tells this she goes to Polly's house and sits there with a beer and tells the step-by-step story of the rape itself. And it's a dreadful, awful, blooming, terrible story. And all the way through it, Jimmy Stewart is you can tell he's either calculating how he can use this story to get his client released, or alternatively, he's ogling her body in her tight trousers. Yeah. That's as far as the film is concerned, it could be that somebody ripped up one of Lieutenant Mannion's baseball cards, and that's why he committed the murder. Yeah. No one would think of the baseball card's feelings. That would be irrelevant. It's just an object. But and people are treating Laura just the same way. She's not a victim of a crime. She is an object who may or may not have been violated. And otherwise, she's kind of this sort of silly, sexy girl with grey hair. This element of the film, I think, really dates it.
Yeah.
And is I think a bit uncomfortable to watch in 2024.
I agree with you entirely. There's a lot of slut shaming in this film. There's a lot of attention paid to her clothing.
Yes.
As if she was inviting rape.
Yeah. I mean, we are still playing out these ideas now in some circles, so it's not like it's an idea that has disappeared.
Yeah.
But yes, it's difficult to watch in this film.
Yeah, it is. And there's some funny bits, like the it's almost as if a girdle is to protect her as well as to make her look more serious as a victim. But the character says to her, according to her story, of course, I'm going to rape you. Barney Quill says, I'm going to rape you. And then, there's a lot of fixation on dress. Like, were you wearing a girdle? And I need you to wear a girdle from now on. So there's a lot of stuff about dress, and that, in some way she was inviting what happened to her. And then that she's flirtatious with Jimmy Stewart's character, Paul, a little bit. But then Ben Gazzar, her husband, is very jealous, and he's always worried about her. And the inmates that he's temporarily housed with are saying, "Boy, you got to be careful with your wife." So there's a lot of insinuation that for some reason maybe she wasn't raped, or she was inviting rape. That is very uncomfortable to see on screen now. But as you said, it still happens. So it's not like we've evolved that much.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that was new in this film, by reading around, my understanding is that the concept of coaching the defendant is a relatively new notion in courtroom drama at this point as well. I wonder whether that was a little bit of a shock to audiences at the time, who may possibly be under the impression that the legal profession was a little bit more scrupulous than it appears. Yeah. I mean, Polly, he treads very carefully, and he doesn't kind of feed this story to Mannion, but he coaxes him along a little bit like, his technique for fishing, isn't it? He has tossed the fly into the water, and he is just twiddling it, waiting for Mannion to come up and grab it and tell him the thing that he needs to hear.
Yeah.
That fishing kind of metaphor is used to its full advantage.
Yeah. He's even tying fish ties during the trial. Paul sitting there at his desk. Yes. If he's not interrogating a witness, he's tying ties. And he sort of, he tricks the prosecution. The prosecutors into a couple of mistakes as well. So the fishing metaphor is all over, which is great. And I guess it's not subtle when you think about it, but it feels subtle. It feels fresh and appropriate.
It's not completely, in your face, is it? It's not too on the nose. Yeah. Well, we have rung the spoiler bell.
Yeah.
So I guess we can talk about the end of the film. And a lot of it revolves around finding these panties, which nobody could find after the alleged rape. And once the panties are found, that's kind of like the big turning point and sort of the moment that turns it all around.
Yep.
But at the end of the film, it's a surprisingly downbeat, nihilistic ending, I think. So Mannion is found not guilty on grounds of temporary insanity. He is released. And when Polly and Parnell drive off to see him the morning after, perhaps hoping to collect their check, or at least to tell him, well done, you got off, son. They find that he and Laura have already left town, no forwarding address, and all they've left behind them is a trash can, which is the closing image of the film. So Mannion has left them a note, which kind of implies, I think, that the whole temporary insanity story was, just an excuse, and he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
And the camera just focuses on the trash can, which is loaded with empty gin bottles and a woman's shoe.
Yep.
Which I wrote in my notes, a last sneering moment of misogyny to close the picture. But it's a pretty downbeat, noirish ending. For a film which is supposedly about justice prevailing.
Yep. Well, it also uses the terminology is great in the letter that Mannion writes, because he uses he says he had to leave town because he had an irresistible impulse, which is the legalese that Jimmy Stewart sort of coaxes out of him. So live by the sword, die by the sword kind of moment. And it's tragic for Paul because it's made quite clear that he hasn't been doing much lawyering. He's been doing more fishing lately, so he needs money. He can't pay his secretary. So he needs the money, and there's a lot of chatter about, getting what I don't know, the word is a down payment or a promissory note to get the trial started. He's going to represent him for $3,000, but Mannion wants to give him $150. And then he ends up getting nothing whatsoever. But he sort of, I think he kickstarts his career, and Parnell is sort of sober, which he hasn't been for many years. So now they've got a new law practice together. So you assume that they're going to do well, but they learn their lesson by not getting the money up front from Mannion.
The film has a weird attitude to things like alcohol, doesn't it? Because there's an enormous amount of smoking in this film. There's quite a bit of smoking in Anatomy of a Fall, and I think part of that is an homage to this film.
Yeah.
There's a lot of smoking in Anatomy of a Murder. There's a lot of drinking as well. Parnell is clearly an alcoholic, and Polly is kind of feeding him booze, isn't he? At least, he's happy to share a drink with him at the beginning of the film, and he suggests you should get sober when they accept the case, but he is kind of feeding his friend's habit. People are drinking and boozing all the way through the film, which is another thing which makes it look, very 1950s.
Yeah.
I did write in my notes here, it's a very white film, isn't it? Everybody involved, I think, the only people of colour that I can remember seeing are Duke Ellington himself, who turns up as a cameo as a band leader, who's playing in this club, and he lets Jimmy Stewart play along with him on his piano, and then the rest of his band, that's it. I was going to ask you, would it be plausible that a person of colour might be in the jury in Michigan in 1959, or would that simply be unthinkable?
I think that's probably unthinkable. Even in the North, yeah, I think it's unthinkable. Civil rights movement really hits on the mid-'60s, so this is just before the Civil Rights Movement. So
people of color are basically invisible in this film, aren't they?
And jury duty is based on. I think you have to be a registered voter to have jury duty. A lot of blacks were not registered voters. I think more so in the South, but probably in the North too. I think it's mostly musicians, which is sort of an admission, I think, and an homage to the fact that most great American music, if not all American music, really comes out of black culture. So that's you could gloss it that way. It makes you feel a little bit better about it. At least the musicians were not white musicians, I guess, stealing black music. But I think he plays a character named Pie Eye, isn't it? He's the band leader, Pie Eye. And I thought Duke Ellington might be in it a bit more, but he was in really just that one scene. And so again, at least for 1959, putting a black musician next to a white man playing a lawyer at a piano and playing together, that's probably pretty progressive.
Oh, yeah, probably it was. It's interesting the role that music plays in this film, actually, because Polly loves his jazz, doesn't he? He gets behind the piano a lot, and he plays some reasonably modern jazz. It's not super free. It's not like it's not Ornette Coleman or whatever. He's not smashing the keyboard with his knees or something. But it's I think the notion is to show that he is a fairly modern thinker.
Yeah.
Through his enjoyment of some reasonably contemporary jazz. I was trying to think if there was a modern equivalent of this, like where you would make a film now and you would have a fairly serious middle-aged lawyer get home and start scratching some turntables, or maybe play a game on his Xbox or something like that to show that he's like he's a modern down with the kids type guy. I'm guessing that is the function of it. I don't know whether the notion of the audience watching this film is that they would be hesitant to trust a white lawyer who plays and listens to jazz, because is it his secretary or is it Parnell who sort of teases him about listening to jazz, like it's a lesser music somehow, or crazy music. That could be in there. I mean, I think just the straight economics of bringing in a famous jazz musician at a time and bringing them into the film. It's not unlike having. Sometimes we see musicians. Justin Timberlake's in the Facebook movie there, The Social Network, or something like that. You're sort of you're crossing over a little bit to bring in a wider audience. So it's possible that was at play as well. I'm going to email Justin Timberlake later on and tell him that you compared him to Duke Ellington. I think he will be as pleased as punch.
He should be honored. He should thank me.
Oh my God, you should be honored.
He should come on the pod just to thank me.
I do have a bit of an embarrassing confession. about this film this week, which is that I'm sorry to say I have let down the Two Real Book Club this episode. So I did start the book Anatomy of a Murder. It's enormous. It is 500 pages.
Yeah.
It is a very big, long book, and I only got about 30% of the way into it, I'm afraid. I started with good intentions, but that book is way over long.
Wow.
And what it really reminded me of is that thing that Stephen King famously said about adverbs, where it said something like, if you ever write any adverbs, cross them out.
Yeah.
Never use adverbs. And this book is full of adverbs. It's clearly dates from an era where your book couldn't be considered worthwhile or literary if it didn't consist of two extraneous sentences for every sentence that deserved to be there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of guff and plenty of adverbs. And additionally, the book is sexist, at least as sexist, probably more sexist than the film. And the film is racist as well. It's full of sneering comments about the Irish. It just goes on and on. I mean, oh my God.
Wow. So
actually, in 2024, the book Anatomy of a Murder is a bit of a painful read, and I'm not sure that I would recommend anyone run to the library and get it. The 30% I got to, it very closely resembled the film. So if you've seen the film, you know what? I think you have been read the best of the book. Don't force yourself to get the same story at 1/4 speed. That's my recommendation.
Okay, well, we give you permission to put that book down permanently.
Thank you.
Don't have
I won't be drummed out of the book club officially yet then.
Yeah. There was one bit of characterization I wanted to run by you because I've never seen, particularly a tough guy, use a, what do they call it? It's like a cigarette holder. So Mannion uses a cigarette holder whenever he smokes cigarettes, and no one else, not even his wife, uses a cigarette holder. And it felt like, he was a cuckold or something like that, or he was a weak man, and of course his wife is going to cheat on him because he uses a cigarette holder.
Now, they do discuss that at excessive length in the book, actually. I think the cigarette holder is an antique Chinese cigarette holder, which is a keepsake from his time in the Korean War, apparently.
Oh.
So they talk about the cigarette holder at some length, and I think the intention is to show that he is aloof and arrogant.
Oh.
I think that is the function of the cigarette holder. I think to a modern eye, it doesn't really look like it, does it? It just looks like, yes, it looks fey and ridiculous, doesn't it? But I think, aloof and arrant is what they were going for with the cigarette holder.
I don't think I got that in the film.
No, I agree.
Maybe that's in the book, yeah.
The film has slavishly taken quite a lot of things from the book that it probably could have quite comfortably ditched.
Yeah. And then I think another thing that I noticed in the film was that they skipped the closing arguments entirely, which seems, you think of those as being the big dramatic moments, but the writer and Preminger, they just decide to not put that in there. Or maybe they filmed it and just didn't use it. But there's no mention, there's no imagery of the closing arguments.
It's like, I think, isn't there a moment when the two prosecutors, they look at each other as to say, oh, that's it, we're sunk, don't they?
Yes.
So it's like, the rest of the argument is now extraneous. They've lost.
We've lost to Jimmy Stewart, which is not a bad way to lose, I guess.
Well, I enjoyed the film a great deal.
Good.
Enough that it's gonna feature heavily as we play my favorite game.
Ooh.
Let's play Who Am I?
Who am I?
And as usual, I can't remember who goes first.
Okay.
Do you want to go first?
I'm happy to go. I couldn't decide, so I am happy to go first. We know you're a doctor. We know you're probably the fantastic coroners in Anatomy of a Fall. So if I were in Anatomy of a Fall, I'd be the dead guy. He's a struggling writer. He's incapable of completing a home improvement project. So I could be Samuel, but better yet, whenever I see Jimmy Stewart, I just want to be Jimmy Stewart, especially when he's a jazz fan and a great player as well. I mean, I don't know if he's actually playing piano in this film, but he looks great at the piano. He looks great in the courtroom. So who doesn't want to be Jimmy Stewart, I guess?
Doesn't want to be Jimmy Stewart.
How about yourself?
Well, there is one actor in the film who is brave, affectionate, loyal, handsome, capable, all the things that I would like to be, and that is Messi the dog.
Yes.
but I can't keep asking to be a dog in these films. Because that is a bit of a cop-out.
You've done it a couple of times. It's true.
Yes, exactly. So I'm starting to ask questions now. So if I have to identify a character who's like actually a bit like me, I think it might be the judge in Anatomy of a Murder.
Oh, he's awesome.
Judge Weaver. Yeah. So he is awesome, and I had to do a little bit of reading about him. He is played by real-life lawyer Joseph Welch. It's his only ever acting role on screen, but he was famous to the American public in 1959 because he had earlier rebuked Senator McCarthy live on television during the House Un-American Activities hearings. So he was, kind of a hero to progressive Americans. And he died 15 months after the film was released, interestingly.
Oh, no.
But I love him in this film. He watches what's going on. So he's a little bit aloof, but also he is kind and he is fair and he is curious. He sticks to the rules. Yeah. He makes comments to the jury. He tells off the lawyers. Every time he opens his mouth, generally it's pretty entertaining. I reckon maybe this is wishful thinking. I don't think I'm quite like him yet.
Okay.
But I think in another 5 or 10 years, I can see myself being like him, but in the hospital. I will be standing at the head of a sleeping patient. Adjudicating while 2 orthopedic surgeons argue with each other over a broken hip, and I will be channeling Judge Weaver in my professional life.
Yeah, he's wonderful because he's quite deadpan, but very comical and relatable, I guess. Very down home and good choice.
It's just so natural on camera, isn't he? Which I mean, there is a big performative element to being a judge, isn't there?
Yeah.
So he has had 40 years of stage training by being a lawyer, I think.
Yeah, going way back, he reminds me quite a bit of Clarence, the actor who plays Clarence in It's a Wonderful Life, the angel who comes down to save Jimmy Stewart. And maybe in the back of my mind, I was thinking, these guys have been on screen together in another great film, and it's not him at all, obviously. But maybe you figure maybe Jimmy Stewart brings certain things out when he's acting with certain characters and certain actors, and it's interesting to see that the judge never played another role on screen, but he was great with Jimmy Stewart. Really good chemistry.
Jimmy Stewart makes everything better, doesn't he?
Oh God, if we still had some Jimmy Stewart around, we'd be
that's who
much
we need.
Better. You know who Jimmy Stewart might remind me of, and I'm only saying this because we haven't said the name on the pod in a while. Tom Hanks. We got to get more Tom Hanks in there.
The 21st century Jimmy Stewart.
There you go.
Yep, not bad. That's almost as flattering as comparing Duke Ellington to the lead singer of NSYNC. So.
Yeah.
Shall we do it? Let's do our synthesis then. We'll try
it.
and bring these two films together. I think they have a lot in common. You know what these films definitely have in common is 75% of the words in their titles.
That's right.
So
Anatomy of a Fall. You're right. Anatomy of. You're right. It is 75%.
75%. I calculated and everything.
Calculated.
I mean, clearly, Anatomy of a Fall is called that because it's taken its name from the Preminger picture.
Yeah.
But I think it's more than a simple homage. I think I'm going to argue that the new film it's not quite a remake of the old one, but it's a kind of a remix because there are so many touchstones in common. Yeah. Not just that they are trial films, but this whole notion that the prosecution are trying to swing the trial by impugning a woman's reputation over a sexual history.
Precisely.
The victim was himself a man with a history of violence. It's just the way a significant segment of the story revolves around a dog. They've both got a dog in them, these films. Plus also, the constant smoking. There's a scene of driving at night in Anatomy of a Fall, which I think is supposed to recall all the nighttime driving that happens in Anatomy of a Murder. The death happens in a holiday destination. There are so many nods to the earlier film. And some of them have been updated. Some of them have pointedly not been updated. I think this film really learns a lot by having watched that earlier film.
You're right. I mean, I once had a film professor, not a very good one, so I won't mention his name, but he always, he said, why do people remake the good films? You really want to remake the bad films because you're going to make them better. If you remake a good film, you're setting a really high bar for yourself, and very rarely can you clear that bar. So you mentioned a lot of similarities. For me, there's some really big differences, and I think that's where I would focus, is that I think, number one, just talking about music, I was expecting so much more from the musical bits in Anatomy of a Fall. But they didn't really play that much into the story. It was my final takeaway there when I thought they were going to play more a role in the story. I'm not sure that the Duke Ellington stuff and the music fits Anatomy of a Murder, but I love it. I think it makes it a better film. It feels kind of odd. It's like it was just thrown in there, and that's why I felt like, this is kind of like a marketing thing. But Duke Ellington's music is fantastic. So, you're starting with a strong product. His cameo is perfectly fine. It doesn't give us a lot of information about him or why he's in the film. But it's great. And I think it does give good characterization to Jimmy Stewart. This is a lawyer who's very clearly set apart from his opposing lawyer. So I think the music is much stronger in Anatomy of a Murder, even if it doesn't necessarily fit the film. But I think it does capture, that's the jazz age. So that was the music of the time. Whereas I felt let down by the music in Anatomy of a Fall. And as you said, it's possibly sparsely orchestrated, I guess, or sparsely scored, because we can remember a couple of tunes, and that draws more attention to them because there's not a lot of incidental music. But I think the music was ended up being weak, or it was just a big MacGuffin in Anatomy of a Fall somehow. I'm not sure exactly, but that was something that really struck me as being different. I think just the noir element of Anatomy of a Murder is so strong, and you get so much more information out of the pictures. And I just didn't get a lot of information out of the cinematography of Anatomy of a Fall. It's, they're both very procedural in the sense that they're courtroom dramas, but I felt like the Anatomy of a Murder was much more informative. It felt very subjective, even though there's all this subjective value stuff around Lee Remick's character. What is her? Is she Laura? Laura Mannion?
Laura Mannion.
Laura Mannion. Yeah, so there's a lot of subjective stuff about her and sort of bias against her. But I think in general, there's a lot of information that comes out in that trial, whereas the Anatomy of a Fall is it's just scandal more than anything else, and sort of contrived tension with the French lawyer in the Santa Claus costume and all of that. So, and then I guess the last thing I think was, there's just a really good mix of tone. Preminger does an amazing job of just having those comic moments be funny, but not drawing too much attention to them to ruin his tone of the film. And there's just a really skillful mix of shots, which I think the other film lacks. I think the cinematography is really strong in Anatomy of a Murder. I don't think I got much out of that in Anatomy of a Fall. They're pretty shots.
It's workmanlike, isn't it?
Yeah, they're postcard shots, right? There's some mountain stuff, but most of it's in either that courtroom or their house, and there's just not a lot of variety. There's not a lot of mix of shots, and I think that lends to the tone. I mean, it gets kind of monotonous and dull when you're just looking at the same two sets. I really think you were joking about it becoming a play soon, but it really should be. It's kind of in that realm of Women Talking, which we saw last year, where this might have been good in a cinema on screen, but it's probably going to be dynamite in a theater with a live audience. So I think they're just very different films in that way. So I'm really accenting the differences more than any similarities right now. The similarities are quite obvious, and I didn't think a whole lot about it being a remake, but you've nailed it. I think you've done a good job there.
I have one other kind of point about the synthesis, and this may well be controversial, and you're welcome to tell me I've pushed it too far. But when Anatomy of a Fall ends with this kind of slight ambiguity, and you're not entirely clear whether Sandra pushed and bludgeoned her husband or whether he jumped, I think the fact that the film is called Anatomy of a ... is actually giving you that final clue. Sandra in Anatomy of a Fall is the equivalent of Mannion in Anatomy of a Murder. They are both the people who are in the dock on trial.
Yeah.
And we know for sure that Mannion did it. There's witnesses. There's never any question that he didn't murder Barney Quill. The question is just whether should he accept responsibility or not. And we know from the final sequence in that film that the whole temporary insanity thing is a bit of a bodge. And he probably is just as guilty as he looks with his little cigarette holder. But I think... this is a kind of cinephiles puzzle. I think Justine Triet is dangling this in front of your face to say, if you want to know whether she really did it or not, you have to watch the other film. Oh. And that will tell you the answer. And the mere fact that she's named her film after the Preminger film is a clue that Sandra is just as guilty as Lieutenant Mannion is in his film. Yeah, that's what I think. I think this is one of the precepts of our podcast, isn't it? That no art exists in a vacuum. Yeah. Films depend on art that has come before, and I think this is a very explicit example of just that.
Wow! So I would say two things. We're lucky that we chose this film. That was good, good fortune, good planning. And then the other is, I guess, that it oddly suggests that you need some prior knowledge of a film from 1959 to understand a film from 2023. Which I mean. Not a lot of people. It's a black and white film. No one watches a black and white film of their own volition anymore. So,
in fact, if you were, let's do a quick bit of calculating. If you were 20 years old and taking your date to go and see Anatomy of a Murder, you would be in your late 80s by now, wouldn't you? I think.
85 and 83, 84, 85.
Yeah, there won't be a lot of people who've seen both of these movies at the cinema.
Yeah, right.
Right. Well, on that extremely stretched, tenuous point, let's discuss what else has been playing at this theatre.
I think you're going to have to go first and last because I'm not sure I even saw anything. So tell me what you saw.
You know what you have been doing is working too hard.
Way too hard.
I'm almost as bad as you. So I've only seen one film and it was bad. We are thinking about cancelling our Disney Plus subscription. I've ended up paying for another year, but I thought I should catch up on some of the pictures that that are on the service just in case we end up cancelling it. Okay. So I watched The Marvels, which is the most recent of the MCU pictures. And I'm sorry to say it's not very good. It's a cosmic action adventure. It's directed by Nia DaCosta, written by her and two other women. So it's directed by a woman, written by three women. It stars three women superheroes. It has a woman villain. And so it's really, really annoying that it's not good. I really, really wanted it to be good, and it's disappointing that it's not. The reason it's not good is nothing to do with the fact that many of the people involved in the creative process are women.
Yeah.
It's not very good because of the usual basic things. They're not clear about the rules. The characters are a bit vague. The motivations are wobbly. The stakes aren't really clear. It's poor control of tone. It's serious, and it's slapstick, and then it's serious, and then there's a musical number, and people make confusing decisions. So it's all these kind of basic problems that could have been ironed out with a few more drafts when they were writing the script. But because the film bombed at the box office, didn't make money, some people are taking this as an excuse to complain that films have got too many women in, and it's the women that are the problem, which is very, very annoying. I was reading a news story this week about how there's an activist investor. How has that become a thing? Called Nelson Peltz, who is trying to get a seat on the board at Disney. And his whole mission is to try and unwoke the company. There was an interview published with him just saying, why do I have to have a Marvel film that's all women? Not that I have anything against women, but why do I have to have that? Wow. He said in the interview published on Friday. Why can't I have Marvels that are both? Why do I need an all-black cast? So he's determined to try and get white people back at the centre of cinema. What we need is more white men being represented. Yes, well done, activist investor Nelson Peltz. Just makes me want to chew my own fingers off. I'm sorry, but it's a tragedy not just for Disney that The Marvels is not very good. It's a tragedy for cinema in general, because it's unfortunately going to be used as some kind of ludicrous crowbar to sideline women yet further in the film business. Oh, good.
Wow.
So bad for many reasons. I apologize.
I'm glad I didn't see that. And heads up to everyone who's listening. Maybe we shouldn't see that. I wish I'd seen something. I just can't think of anything. I didn't make any notes of it. I was very busy with family and friends and work in the last couple of weeks and writing.
And a new cat.
Yeah, I've been doing a new cat and a lot of writing this week. So I haven't seen much. But one thing I didn't see is a film. What I missed, what I was planning to see, but there was too much family around and too many cats around. The Teacher's Lounge, but maybe I'll have a chance to see that soon. Segue.
Yes, because please join us for our next episode when we will be watching, Cats Allowing, Teacher's Lounge, and comparing it to
Sir with Love. I think that's 1967 to 9, somewhere in there.
Sidney Poitier again. Brilliant.
Sidney Poitier comes back to the pod.
I have never seen that film, To Sir with Love, much to my shame, so I'm looking forward to catching up with both of them.
Yeah, it should be great. And that was directed by, and it always amazes me, James Clavell. Best known for Shogun Monstrosity, right? He did the whole miniseries way back when. Wrote the book, I think. He's a
he wrote the book of Shogun, yes.
Which would take a lifetime. I mean, that alone is enough of a lifetime achievement.
Some people are just selfish.
Why do you need to go off and make films, too? Yeah.
So join us next week at the Popcorn Counter, where we're going to be discussing some legalese. Join us on Instagram, where we are at 2 Real Cinema Club. Read the blog at 2realcinemaclub.com. Comment on our YouTube channel or email us at 2realcinemaclub@gmail.com. Can't wait for it. More teachers.
Yeah. We'll see you in the Teacher's Lounge, I guess.
Yeah, we've gone from being the Nazis podcast to the Teachers podcast. That's a bit better. That's a move in the right direction.
Big step up. Yes.
Thank you for joining us as always. See you next time.
Goodbye.